Hi friends, this is Mark Metternich, and here is a quick revision video for the ultimate sharpening workflow for fine art printing. That is going to be remade from the ground up, but because technology is moving so fast, I just want to give you some of the main updates that are important to know. The new video is going to be entirely brand new, and the goal is to make it the most comprehensive sizing and sharpening video tutorial on the market today, and it's going to be a beast to make. So I'm not going to give that away for free, but I will give a hefty discount to those who have the original one. But here are some of the critical things that you should know watching the current version, which still is one of the best video tutorials on the market for sizing and sharpening. But with doing the ultimate fine art printmaking workshop with Robert B. Park of Nevada Art Printers, top print guru probably in the world, and his Lumichrome paper currently being the best supergloss photo paper in the world today, man, have we been pushing things stratospherically. Let me hit on the most important differences, and I'm just going to run through this very quickly. It's going to leave a lot of questions unanswered. Number one, calibrating your monitor is still critical. Currently, I use the i1 Display Pro and believe it's the best in the business. And my newer recommendations for brightness or candelas or luminance is 70 CD. But this is very room brightness specific. I work in a very diffused room that is lower lit. It's definitely not a bright room, but it's not working like in the dark or really, really dark, but it's more on the very diffused lower lit room. And 70 CD with a white background has been nailing it for me for the last few years. So taking those very general points into consideration, if you're working in a brighter environment or maybe even a little darker, you may have to adjust a little bit one way or the other. I particularly would not probably go below 65 CD unless I was working in the dark, but we do not recommend working in a dark environment because you lose perspective of what's going on with colors and such. You get kind of tunnel vision. Next, 4K and 5K monitors, I'm very sorry to say, but because of their pixel densities, you cannot accurately evaluate image sharpness and the real pixels and how that will translate to print. The 4K and 5K monitors are a big step backwards. So if you are a serious critical printmaker, you need to be on a below 4K 27-inch or 30-inch. 30-inch is ideal. The good news is that they're not that expensive. Dell Ultra Sharps, you can go with BenQ, ISO, NEC. There's different ones out there. You could get away with a 24-inch, say a Dell Ultra Sharp wide gamut, and we do recommend the wide gamut below 4K monitors. But again, most people underestimate this. And what happens is you turn up the sharpening and it's starting to look better, but what happens is you start grossly over sharpening the image. You can't see it. It's impossible. And then if you zoom up on the image closer, those are interpolated versions of the image and they're not giving you accurate representation of what the sharpening is actually doing. There honestly is no workaround at this point. We're hoping that the 8K monitors and their mathematics, when they come out, are an improvement. But right now, all people who take the ultimate fine art printmaking workshop, we recommend below 4K, 27-inch or 30-inch if you're really serious about detail. And no on the laptops. Sorry. Now here's a big one, and I did put something out there on YouTube about it, but there's so much misinformation out there about this subject that it is very difficult to get to the truth. And I have gotten to the truth on it. And that is deconvolution sharpening. I finally understand what happened and why I was taught what I was taught, even though it was by the most reputable people on the planet. But after learning how to run the tests and coming up with a very clear definition of what deconvolution sharpening is for photography print purposes, this is going to shock some people. What you were told in the first video is that radius to the left, detail to the right. Zooming up, absolutely, this is true, 100% viewing distance. And again, I already told you about the monitors, but that this is the deconvolution sharpening. I will tell you right now, please spare me emails or debates or arguments on this, because even some of the greatest names, the biggest names, the PhDs, the people who are writing the books, call this deconvolution. And I have gone to the forums, I have interacted with them or lurked and read everything, and then I've done the testing along with Robert Park of Nevada Art Printers. And when you do the testing, you really see what's going on. And here's the shocker. When we're talking about deconvolution sharpening, we're not talking about an ultra fine sharpening. We're not talking about a sharpening that adds artifacts to an image or haloing on micro edges, not even micro contrast on edges. And when you watch the video tutorial, you're going to learn about a lot of this. Deconvolution is actually a type of algorithm that is doing an actual unblurring. When you throw unsharp mask or high pass or smart sharpen or what have you, you're not actually unblurring an image. You're creating a micro contrast at micro edges that makes your image look sharper, better detail. That's good. But this is an actual unblurring. And in my next video that I make about sharpening, which could have a different title, I'm going to go into this a lot and show you the actual examples. The deconvolution is actually reducing blur radius in your image. So if you go up to an edge on anything in your image, way up, like go to Photoshop, go to 12,800%, or maybe not quite that close, but you can actually count how many rows of pixels there are of transition or blur at the sharpest edges of your image. And what deconvolution does is it attempts to, and to some degree, and it's pretty decent, but not perfect. I think it'll get much better, especially over the next 3, 4, 5, 10 years. It's going to get incredibly good. But what it's doing is it is intelligently unblurring or reducing the blur transitions. That is radius to the left, detail to the left. And if you're at 100% viewing distance, it's the same rule. Bring it in, bring it in, bring it in. And if you see any artifacting at all whatsoever, less is more. That artifacting will show up in an enlargement. It will hinder your output sharpening once you've sized it up. This is just the pre-sharpening where you're trying to tighten up the data a little bit so that it's like you shot it through a better lens. So in the video, I say radius to left, detail to the right. And that is what most of the biggest gurus call deconvolution sharpening. And again, I am not going to get into a debate about this because I have seen the best, most smart post-processing PhDs arguing about this back and forth. And the real answer is it depends on what you are talking about when you say deconvolution. What we are talking about is reducing blur. We are not talking about micro edge sharpening, detection, haloing, artifacting. And if you use this radius to left, detail to the left this way, and you're really, really careful, that's what this does. And if you have stuff that's really fine, incredible detail with a sharp lens, like say sandstone or gravel or very textured, super fine stuff, we will occasionally pull up the detail by 1 point or 2 points or 3 points, maybe as far as 7. And you will see actually a huge difference. I never go past 7 anymore, period. So I'm just trying to get that unblur. Then after the size up, that's when we do all of the super awesome stuff. This image is not all that sharp to begin with. We got lots of fog and haze. It wasn't shot at f11, it was shot at f16, but the deconvolution radius to the left, detail to the left, does improve the detail in this image prior to upsizing. Okay, I know some of you want proof because you're confused, as I have been, because I got a lot of false information from top names. But let's just do the test, okay? Once you do the test, you know what's going on. And I've tested this many different ways, but this is the easiest way to show you. This is a file that is approximately the common size for our anywhere from 24 up to about 50 megapixel images today. This is more like the 40 something range. I have light gray on one side, I have dark gray on the other side, and literally I'm at 12,800%. So what does that mean? This is the size of a pixel right there. Okay, that's one single pixel out of about 42 million of them, okay? So how much transitional blur is there between a dark gray and a light gray? Okay, there's none. You could never have an image that sharp. I don't know, maybe in 20 years with AI and who knows what, but it's impossible. So what is typical if you zoom up to any image, and I'm going to spare you all of that. That'll be in my newest video tutorial so you can actually see examples. But I do this every single day. I'm working on gallery prints for fine art photographers all over the place. That's all I do all day long. So anyway, what's typical is about 4 or 5 or more, could be 6, 8 or more, depending on if you shot at f22, f16, f11, f8. Did your camera shake? You know, if it's a cheap lens, a good lens. But what's typical is about 5 rows of transition between a hard, sharpest edge in your photo. So about 5 is typical for my Sony a7R II, the Sony a7R III, Canon, I can't remember the Canon right now, it's 50 megapixels. It's about 4 or 5 rows of blur. All you have to do is zoom up to something sort of in the middle of your image, the sharpest possible edge, zoom up to 12,800% in Photoshop, and just see how many pixels of transition are there. So there is no transition here. There's no such thing. This is more typical. All I did was Gaussian blur it, okay? So you're gonna have like, I should probably flip it, image 90 degrees clockwise. Okay, it's not still in the middle. So let me zoom back out. And yes, of course, when your image is this small, everything looks sharp. That's for sure, right? Zoom up to the middle. And this is very common right here. This is about like a horizon line or something like that. General sharpening is going to try to find the middle. Okay, so let's say this is the middle here. What it's going to try to do is it's going to create a band of pixels that is brighter. It's adding edge contrast. I'm just going to do it myself, okay? Hit okay. I've never done this before to show people. I teach this all the time, but this is, I don't know. And then it tries to find the other side of the edge, and what it does is it darkens it by the same amount, which I'm probably not going to get exactly right here. And deselect. Now, what do you have there? You have more contrast. This is lighter and this is darker. That is what's going on. Now, that is an artifact. That is a micro halo at edges that makes images look sharper when you size them back down to 300 pixels per inch. It does work up to a point, but that is not actual deconvolution unblurring. That's unblurring. Do you see that there's no lighter side and there's no darker side? It's just that the transitions have been removed. So this really, really special type of sharpening is not going to do that. Let's just slam this with some unsharp mask and just overdo it just so that you can see what I'm talking about. Okay, do you see what I'm talking about? See, it's adding this contrast. It's brightening up this edge, starting up this edge. But you see, look, you got this gray. And now it's getting darker, 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 darker. And then you see this lighter gray, and it's getting lighter, 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 lighter. And it's trying to find the edge. It's trying to create a band or contrast at the micro edges. And yes, when you get down to here, and especially if you're at 300 pixels per inch, all your little details look sharper. But that is an artifact. That is not deconvolution. Just isn't, folks. So let me show you deconvolution. It's an unblurring algorithm. And like I said, only does so good of a job. Filter, camera raw filter, and here it is. This one works the same on TIFF PSDs as it does on raw files. The algorithm affects edges the same way. Radius to the left, detail to the left. Now just close your eyes for a second. I'm going to jack it up all the way. Hit OK. Do you see how this one has more blur and this one has less? This one has more. This one has less. This one has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, almost 7, but 6 rows of transition. This one right here, see, it's trying to undo the transition. So these 2 rows have almost been eliminated, and these 2 have almost been eliminated to where it really only has about 1, 2, 3, 4 rows of transition. Not perfectly, but do you see that that is an unblurring? That is not a band of halos. So that is the edge before deconvolution. That's after, before, after. It's an unblurring. There's your proof, folks. I could show you a lot more. I'm going to talk a little bit more about the capture sharpening, deconvolution right now. The next thing is we no longer are advocating doing this on your raw file. Unless you are a super advanced Photoshop user and you use raw smart objects, If you don't know what that is and exactly what that is, don't even think about it. It's a whole nother thing. It's something worth looking into, but don't even try to do the sharpening this way. But what you do is you create a separate layer. You dial in this deconvolution sharpening, but then you use the intricate, careful masking abilities in Photoshop to bring it into the areas of the image that can handle it or will benefit from it, the mount. And you also want to keep it out of all of your soft areas. And some areas may be able to handle more than other areas. So I'll just give you an example really quick here. So I'm looking at this. Nothing in this image is like really fine detail. It's all kind of softer. So on my monitor right now, I'm taking this up to about 75, 80. I'm not putting my nose on the monitor right now, which I usually do. I put my best glasses on. And this would be my capture sharpened layer. And I'm in camera raw. If you're in Lightroom, same thing. When you're done with the image, then do the capture sharpening, bring it in Photoshop, take another version of your finished image, bring that into Photoshop, and have the capture sharpening in, the other one soft, and then using Photoshop, you can bring it or brush it into the appropriate areas at the right viewing distance. I just turned off raw smart objects. I'm going to bring this image in. Of course, this is a unprocessed image that I'd like to go back and redo one of these days. Now here it is again in raw, and this time I'm taking the sharpening out of the image. So you can see sharpening is off. Open that image. And now we have 2 images. This is one of the ways that you can do it. Select all, make a copy. Make sure you have that one. Close it out if you live dangerously. and paste it in. That's one way to do it. Then at 100% viewing distance, make sure you have no artifacting at all in the capture sharpened version. That's the sharper, that's the less sharp right there. You may not be able to see it because you're dealing with compressed data. So what I will do is I'll put the capture sharpened deconvolution on the top, name it deconvolution, name the bottom one soft, put a black mask on it by holding Alt or Option, and then in Photoshop, I can simply take a brush, choose white, maybe 100%, maybe 70, 60, brush it in, and then brush it into the areas that can handle it. I guarantee you these soft areas here, the foggy, hazy areas cannot handle it. You'll start seeing artifacting. You'll start seeing graininess. But these areas that are out here are going to be able to handle it or handle more of it. So brush it in 100% viewing distance on the appropriate monitor and keep it out of all soft areas like water or clouds or long exposure water effects or the ocean or soft areas or areas that are really far away and hazy maybe. Just be so careful. The problem is that even though the idea is absolutely right on, most people don't have the critical skills to evaluate it so that they're not locking in damage into their TIFF or their PSDs. So we're advocating doing this as a layer and then just keeping that layer so that if you ever find out that you overdid it, you can always omit that layer if you work in layers in Photoshop. So that's one of the ways. That's the deconvolution layer. I'm going to trash it. The other way would be to bring in the soft one, which this is what this is. Duplicate it. I'm going to do a Command or Control J and go to the filter camera raw filter. No, this image is not raw, and no, this filter does not work identical on a TIFF or PSD. I would never do this on a JPEG. But I mean, in terms of how all these algorithms work, it's not identical because this is not a raw file. But when it comes to the detail tab and you do the radius to the left, detail to the left, and you ease it up, this is pixel for pixel the same unblurring that you would be getting if you were doing it on a raw file. And you can dial it in just to the point where it looks just right. Hit OK. That is a filter. This is now the deconvolution capture sharpened layer. And the same thing. Hold Option or Alt, put a black mask on it, and paint it into the areas that you want it painted into. Or do the opposite. Put a white mask on it and grab a black brush. And then go in, paint on the mask, and say, hey, soft brush, 100% opacity. I don't want it in any of these areas. I see grain wherever you see grain, but anything that's supposed to be smooth, there's no way that I want any capture sharpening in it at all. In fact, I might even add a little bit of luminance, noise reduction to smooth it. So all of this water, I'm doing it very sloppy, but if you're really wanting excellence, I would keep all that deconvolution capture sharpening out of your smooth stuff and then make sure that you're bringing the appropriate amounts by brushing it into all of your detailed areas. Again, if you're on a 4K or 5K monitor, don't even try. Just don't do it. Do not sharpen your files before upsizing. There's a lot more to say about it, but that's basically it. Again, if I'm dealing with something like sandstone or intensely detailed, textured, sharp stuff, then maybe I will go 1 point or 2 point or 3 points of detail heading toward the right. I'm talking about 0.1, 0.2, 0.3. And even though it seems like that's nothing, you will see it at 100% viewing distance change pretty darn fast. It's that grainy, fine sharpening, and just a touch of it sometimes is a benefit. I will also say that if you start doing that, the amount is going to have to come down because you're going to see artifacting, a graininess, a digitalness, a crispiness in many of the areas of your image a lot faster. And you don't want to see any of that at 100% viewing distance on the appropriate monitor. Okay, some of you are sick of seeing this photo. I've been using this photo for teaching for, since 2005 when I took it? I don't know. Sorry. Now, the next thing is beta RGB. If you are in Lightroom and you have the most current version, you only have 3 major output color space options that they give you in RAW. That is sRGB. That's a very narrow color gamut. It limits a lot of colors, a lot of saturation. Adobe RGB, which is a moderately wide color gamut that has its own unique pluses and minuses. And then you have ProPhoto RGB, which most people have been saying is the best color space. Again, it's one of those things, I'm not going to get into arguments about it, but those are not the only working spaces people can use. And Robert Park and myself, for the last few years, have been advocating for beta RGB for wide gamut prints. The bottom line on this is that ProPhoto RGB contains a lot of colors that are outside the spectrum of human vision. And when they get pulled back into the spectrum of human vision, especially if they're far outside the gamut, sometimes you can have clipping issues. Please spare me emails on debates on this. All I do is make prints 24/7 when I'm not traveling on the road doing workshops. And we are seeing issues sometimes with the ProPhoto RGB. If you are a Lightroom user, the only way you can go into beta on a raw file is to bring it into Photoshop as a raw smart object. That is a import to Photoshop option. And when there, double click on the image icon in the layer palette and go down to here. Camera Raw will open and you go down here and you can access all of the color spaces that are on your computer. So if you have it in the right place on your computer, you will be able to access it here if you want to use it. Now, of course, when you send it to different printing companies, some may scratch their head, but it's basically like an Adobe RGB. If you want to, and a printing company says, we just only take sRGB, well then, before you output, you're gonna have to turn that photo into sRGB, etc. But this is a really cool color space that we have been really benefiting from in awesome Lumichrome HD prints and wide gamut fine art printing. Now here's a really big one that has changed just recently. Of the upsize options in Photoshop, when you go to image size, what you don't want is automatic, and that is the preset. So you need to go into your Photoshop preferences, that would be right here, and change your interpolation option to something other than automatic, because automatic chooses the wrong thing when downsizing, and today I would say the wrong thing when upsizing as well. But nevertheless, I put something out on the internet. Hopefully I've deleted it since. When Preserve Details 2.0 came out, people were raving about it, and I did the tests, and it was not just bad, it was hideous. It was a upsizing algorithm that just blasted the image with an edge detection sharpening proprietary artifact that just made big enlargements look chunky and unnatural, and so I detested it. And in my video, I used to always say bicubic smoother is the best upsizing algorithm in the world. Generally speaking, it's designed to be a little soft on the upsize so that it can handle more sharpening. Well, that is no longer true, and it's a very complex subject. But to keep it very simple, if you want to adopt a Adobe only workflow and you have the absolute newest version of Photoshop CC 2019 or above, Preserve Detail 2.0 has been massively improved. And it is very close to the new best upsizing algorithm in the world that I was unaware of before, which is called Lanxos. And that can be found in the free raw converter raw therapy. I actually export my TIFF to raw therapy and size it up using Lanxos, and I bring it into Photoshop quite often. But this Preserve Details 2.0 has been able to do almost an identical job. And in certain areas of an image, it might sometimes do a little bit better job. But Lanxos, overall, 80% of these images are the best with Lanxos today. This is not talking about AI, artificial intelligence upsizing algorithms that we are now in the infancy with. And that is a very complex subject matter, but currently they are definitely hit and miss, extremely unpredictable, and very image independent. And when they do their super magic, sometimes can beat other algorithms. It's in chunkier, blotchy areas of the image. So someone can use that, but I'm not going to talk about how to do that because it's so comprehensive. So if you choose Preserve Details 2.0 and you want to adopt an Adobe only workflow, you could size up with 2.0 and have your noise down and off, size up one version, and then size up another one with it maybe on for your smooth stuff like your sky or that soft water effect or whatever that is soft that you do not want to be grainy looking. And you can mask those two together. I will say that if you want to use Bicubic Smoother or any of the other algorithms, they are not as good and they will not be able to produce as good of results if you're really going for the best possible detail in an enlargement. Another really quick improvement to a minimal degree and sometimes no improvement at all, but I think it's probably worth it in most cases, is that in Lightroom or Camera Raw, we now can go to our options and we can choose Enhance Details. And it will change the image into a different profiled image that sometimes retains a little bit better quality and color fidelity. If you zoom up to 100% viewing distance in Photoshop or 200 and you see no difference at all, then you're probably getting no benefit if you're on the right monitor and you don't see it. But sometimes I see a little bit of an improvement, so often I'm choosing that. That's in Lightroom and Camera Raw. By the way, people who want to use the Lanxos algorithm in raw therapy is a very convoluted free raw converter, and many things have to be set up just appropriately or you will be very frustrated with trying to even just import an image, size it, and export it. I have a video tutorial that is free. It's going to be on YouTube and it'll show you how to use raw therapy to size up using that Lanxos algorithm, which, like I said, I believe beats Preserve Details 2.0 in most cases to a small degree. So now we are down to the last two important pieces of information you should know in the most current version of Lightroom and Camera Raw today. We now have this texture slider, and texture, clarity, and dehaze are all attempts to bring more clarity, more, they call it presence, or more definition into an image. The problem is that both clarity and texture have a type of proprietary, kind of like a wide diameter sharpening built into them, as they are also trying to attack mid frequencies and middle tones. Really, these three sliders I would consider middle tone contrast sliders. And with texture, kind of attacking your middle frequencies, not your super soft stuff, not your ultra fine stuff, but kind of that middle detail stuff. This photo has a ton of it. Anyway, it might be tempting to pump that up, or clarity. I'm not going to tell you what to do or not do, but if you are a critical printmaker, I will tell you that both texture and clarity will enhance inherent noise or grainy artifacting that is in your image quite fast. So in my own work, I try to rely on stronger adjustments of dehaze, which really don't get caught up with the names here. Dehaze is a middle tone contrast slider. It's trying to target your grayish middle tone areas of your image and get them less hazy looking, more clarity. You could name all three of these clarity easily, but it's in a more pure algorithm form to where it's not bringing out that noise anything like clarity or texture will, or haloing either. I will tell you that if you jack up dehaze, you're going to have much more saturated colors, and blues will get out of control very fast, at least with this first or second iteration of dehaze. Maybe by the time you see this video, they will have improved that as well. But currently, today, if I use any texture or clarity, I am extremely careful. And it would probably be on an extremely low ISO shot that was a little bit overly bright, brought down, and has no noise in it at all. And I would probably barely use it, maybe use it locally in Photoshop as a raw smart object, or maybe the camera raw filter. So again, just word of warning, I wouldn't jack up texture and clarity, and I'm only talking about values to the right. Values to the left do kind of the opposite. Texture does this sort of almost like an Orton glow. Clarity to the left sort of diffuses your highlights a little bit, makes them kind of softer, and dehaze to the left makes your photo more hazy. Now let's get on to the very last thing that is revised. It's really important. There's a lot more to be said about it than I'm going to tell you, but this is a big plus. I'm going to go ahead, let's just say I don't really want to go into raw therapy to use Lanxos. I'm being a little lazy today. My actual workflow is I will size up using Preserve Details 2.0 with and without the noise reduction on, like totally and not at all. Then I will also go to raw therapy and size one up using Lanxos. And yes, I have tested every algorithm out. I do it every single month. We have this ultimate fine art printmaking workshop, and we guarantee that we are teaching the most cutting edge, most comprehensive print workshop in the industry, or your money back, no questions asked. So I have to test. I have a list of basically every algorithm known to mankind for interpolation or upsizing of photography, including some ones that most people have never ever heard of, and new AI algorithms, and I test them all compulsively. This is my full-time career of something like 17 years now, 16 hours a day behind my computer. So please don't send me any emails like, hey, have you ever tried On One or Genuine Fractals or any of those? The answer is yes, and more yes. Unless it just came out a week ago, then hey, no problem. Please make me aware of something if it's really special. It's my clients who usually say, hey, there's this new thing out. Have you ever tried it? I was like, oh, I haven't heard about that one. I'll try it. I'll test it tonight. Currently, if I was in a hurry, but I wasn't going for ultimate quality, I would just go ahead and use Preserve Details here. If I was going for ultimate quality, I'd try Preserve Details, noise off. Same thing with noise all the way, plus a Lanxos, and maybe 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 10 layers with different things tried. Then when I size it up to its massive image at 50% viewing distance, I evaluate all of those layers. And I can get into comprehensive interactions that most people would not have the time or the OCD mentality to even think about. But let's just go ahead, image size, We're going 300 PPI because that is what Lumichrome is, which is the only thing I'm currently printing my own work off of, although I do work for photographers and gallery photographers, whatever it is that they need the most. And that best prints at 300 pixels per inch. I'm going to switch this to inches, and let's just say I need a 50-inch print. I'm going to go ahead and use the Preserve Details 2.0. I'm going to turn off the noise reduction, hit OK. May look horrible right now, but we are zoomed far too up close on this image. And while this is sizing up, I will say that Preserve Details 2.0 does have quite a varying effect depending on the resolution and quality of the file that's being upsized, whereas Lanxos has more of a consistency. So sometimes Preserve Details just doesn't look quite as good to me. Sometimes it's almost identical to Lanxos, whereas Lanxos is very consistent, and Lanxos does not have any hybrid edge detection kind of sharpening secret sauce built into it. It's actually preserving the real detail without sharpening as it's sizing, but much better than Bicubic Smoother can, because it's a more sophisticated and it's a bit slower algorithm, but it's more intelligent. Now, we want to be at 50% viewing distance on this image, and the kind of chunky blotchiness that I'm seeing on this aspen tree is probably not due to the Preserve Details. It's probably due to the deconvolution capture sharpening applied to the image too strong locally there, because I don't see it in the other aspen trees, but I do also see it in the background, some kind of square patterns back there. So this is a lower megapixel image I shot a long time ago, so I'm going to go back to the drawing board. And let's go ahead and size it up. Image size, Preserve Details, inches, go 50 inches by 33.333. Have the noise turned off, and I can zoom this out to the 50% viewing distance, and I can actually take a look and see, hey, is this going to do a good job? Sometimes it takes a little bit for this preview to kick in. I just want to say that it's looking pretty good, and I do think that the capture sharpening was the culprit, but this is a good example. The lower megapixel images maybe not responding to Preserve Details as well as they would Lanxos. But I'm going to go ahead and size it up, see how it looks. The key is we want no artifacts, or as least as possible. We don't want it noisy or grainy or digital or crispy or weird, because when we size it up, it's going to get worse. And then when we try to sharpen it, what's it going to do? It's going to get even worse. We're trying to have very clean files. A word of warning again about the capture sharpening. I only do the capture sharpening, the deconvolution capture sharpening, on extremely low ISO images that were predominantly shot a bit on the bright side and pulled down, or even pulled ISO shots. That means you shoot the ISO expansion low on your camera, where your camera shoots a stop brighter and brings it down even before you have seen the image. Those are so clean that when you're looking at them at 100% viewing distance at their native size, and you turn off the color noise in Lightroom or Camera Raw, if you're not seeing color noise, even with it off, now that's going to be a pristine file, and that file is going to be able to handle the capture sharpening, the deconvolution sharpening, way more than an image that has some noise that's been eliminated by that color noise slider. Now, if you shot 200 ISO or 400 ISO and you've got quite a bit of color specks in there, but they've been removed, it leaves a incongruity of pixels, kind of a graininess. How do you sharpen grain? It gets grainier. So again, capture sharpening is relegated to very clean files, and it's done with extreme care. This image would be pretty challenging because you have stuff that is in focus and stuff in the background that's blurry. So you certainly wouldn't want a grainy type of capture sharpening here. I would only go radius to the left, detail to the left, and nothing else if I tried. We are now at 50% viewing distance. In my video, I advocated for 25% viewing distance for higher PPI files, like 400 PPI files from the Durst Lambda, sometimes maybe 360. But today, things have changed a bit and we're getting better results off of 300 PPI files off of the current printers that are coming out. And so most of the time, 50% viewing distance at 300 PPI is the ticket. That's a whole another can of worms. But if you're up at 360 or 400 for some reason, then sometimes 25% viewing distance is a little bit more accurate. All the in-between viewing distances like 33.3 and 66.6 and all of that, those are interpolations. They are representations of your image that are not pixel for pixel accurate, and they cannot give you the feedback that you need for critical sharpening, printmaking, upsizing, noise evaluation, etc. 50% viewing distance, I might go look at what it looks like at 25, but basically that's it. And I think that one of the other things that a lot of people did wrong that have watched my videos over the years is over sharpened. And we were trying to figure out, is it the techniques that I was teaching? And we have found that in the vast majority of cases, it's actually the 4K monitors, the 5K monitors, or people working off of laptops. They can't see that they are over sharpening their images. So look at this. It actually looks pretty darn good. I'm pretty happy with it. I am seeing a little bit of a pattern, these kind of squarish patterns back here that should not be here. And I believe that is probably due to the Preserve Details 2.0. And so in this case, I would absolutely use the Lanxos. If you take our print workshop and you want the ultimate of the ultimate of the ultimate, we do have some proprietary techniques that we are teaching that are stratospheric, off the charts, that no one is teaching. And we have even been able to get 3 megapixel images up to 80 inches, 90-inch prints that are incredibly detailed. It is common today, if you use all of the proprietary techniques, you're just extremely a perfectionistic OCD type, and you want to produce the absolute best possible print like a Lumichrome, and you want to give it the very best information. We are now getting 60, 70, 80, 96-inch prints into the over 100-inch prints that are just like large format in many cases that you would never believe today off of our standard camera equipment, not even medium format. You could come and see at the workshop. We always have the actual files printed out so you can actually see them. You can see the original file when I'm working on it and what I did or what we did to get them to look the way they look. But this is not normal stuff. It's not just running it through a something. There is a lot going into this. So here it is. It's sized up. In the first video, I basically said duplicate your layer, and then I would use high pass. Today, I don't generally use overlay the most when I'm doing high pass. You can use overlay, soft light. You can use different layer blend modes, and I didn't go into that on the last video. More often than not, I'm using linear light, which at the moment looks ridiculous, but I kind of call it high pass on steroids. So I'm going to go ahead and go to Filter, Other, High Pass. I make it a shortcut because I do it so often. I am not using the unsharp mask hardly ever anymore, because I'm able to get everything and more done with high pass. And I just want to show you that you can run multiple high passes on an image, whereas the first video I basically told people, bring it up, bring it up, bring it up until it looks its best, but high pass can only go so far. That's what I believed a couple of years ago. And now what we're doing more often is bringing it up and then duplicating in a variety of ways the high pass to where it is doubling up. And you can click into the high pass. You can create a second layer, do high pass again, another layer, do high pass again. And you could run different numbers, like maybe run 1.2 once, and then maybe run 0.5, a finer high pass, once or twice or 3 times or whatever, and kind of mask in the increased definition into certain areas and leave it out of the areas that it's causing problems. But the thing that is so cool about high pass sharpening is that it is basically a frequency fall off type of sharpening. It's trying to sharpen your image in the more detailed areas, and where the image is more soft, the sharpening, generally speaking, falls off. And I'm not using Smart Sharpen. I am not using Unsharp Mask hardly at all, maybe for specialized things. It is the high pass that's doing most of the grunt work, including some proprietary other sharpening methods that we have innovated, which we are not disclosing at this moment. But high pass in multiple layers, and you can try it. Linear light, try it soft light, try it in different forms, but that linear light has that much more grittier strength, and you really don't need a ton of it to get your image really sharp. So that's it. High pass is now the sharpening method of preference. And again, when I say these things, I don't do this, I don't do that. I test and do everything. I break the rules all the time, but it would get too complex to even begin to teach it. So the big change is high pass can be duplicated 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 times if you want. You can run high pass on an image, you can merge it up and then duplicate it, run a different type of high pass on it. Linear light or now soft light at a smaller radius for finer sharpening. It's playing around with the high pass and then using masks, making sure that generally everything is sharper, and then brushing in that extra sharpness into the areas that you want a little bit extra sharp. So there's your revisions. There's going to be a whole lot more than that coming your way with the new video tutorial when it finally comes out. But all the best to you, great light to you, and have fun making masterful enlargements.